We are joined now by Max Goodman, Yankees beat writer for New Jersey Advanced Media. Max, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, Kate. I appreciate it.
What is your lasting memory of this 2024 World Series?
Well, it was a doozy. There were some memorable games in there, and I think that the Yankees had opportunities to win more of those and maybe make this last until 6 and 7 and go back to LA. But ultimately, it came down to the mistakes. And you can say that Los Angeles was a better team. Maybe they probably would have won that series either way, but in Game 1 and Game 5 and a little bit throughout, and even the whole year, it was mistakes and letting other teams capitalize on those. Superstars not playing as well as they probably should have with Judge. He finally broke through at the end, but it was a little bit too late at that point.
Yeah, we're going to get into a lot of that here, but first let's talk about kind of the biggest storyline coming up, right, when it comes to the roster. Garrett Cole opted out of his contract. Yankees have until tomorrow to offer him another year and $36 million, or he becomes a free agent. So what do you think? Is it a slam dunk that the Yankees re-sign him?
I would be shocked if they don't. Really, the only logic to potentially not picking it up is you think that, he's already starting his decline in terms of age, and he had the arm injury this year, first time he's really had any sort of adversity with his elbow. And he's been so good throughout his career, but maybe you want to bet on somebody younger and go after a free agent like a Corbin Burns or something like that. But Cole means so much to this franchise. Yeah. It's a uniform that he's wanted to wear throughout his life, coming up to his career too. And he's a leader behind the scenes. He's been rising to the occasion as the ace in that uniform for the last several years. So I would be shocked if they let him go, even with the fact that you're giving him $36 million when he's 38 or 39 years old. You don't necessarily have to worry about that right now. It's so far in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe they could come up with some sort of deferrals or something like that to soften the cost right now and go after some other big names like a Juan Soto, like you said earlier. But I would be shocked if they don't bring him back and pick up that extra year.
Another guy, while we're talking about the old guys, right? You got Anthony Rizzo here. His career might have come to an end. Yankees didn't pick up his option. They'll pay him $6 million to say goodbye. He could now re-sign at a lower number, but for now the Yankees do still need a first baseman. At 35, does Rizzo still have that value for the Bombers?
Well, he seems to think that he has a lot left to give, and I think he gets a little bit of a grace period here because of just how unlucky he's been on some of the injuries these last few years, the concussion, post-concussion syndrome that he had in 23, and this year with the forearm fracture and then the fractured fingers in his right hand going into the playoffs. So there is potential there, and you talk about leadership. He means just as much, if not more, in that clubhouse. He's a very close friend to Aaron Judge. You feel like Judge will probably want him to stay, but the decline has been as glaring with Rizzo. And you look at first base. I mean, you can go back to 2016, and the Yankees have the worst batting average at first base than any other team in baseball, bottom 2 or 3 in OPS. So a position that's so synonymous with power and prodigious power. Some of the all-time greats at that position have been in pinstripes. It hasn't been like that for almost a decade, and that's Greg Bird, Luke Voit, Chris Carter, the last year of Mark Teixeira, and then you bring in Rizzo, and the trade in 2021 seemed to be a good move, but now it hasn't necessarily worked out the last few years.
Well, there is a first baseman across town who's also a free agent. What do you think? Are the Yankees going to make a move for Pete Alonso?
They should consider it. I don't know what the money's going to be, and if the price is right, they've got some other dollars they've got to invest in Soto and some other places too, but they have to upgrade at first base. Maybe you bring Rizzo back, and if he's willing to have a non-starting role or something like that where he would platoon, but if you're going to make an upgrade at first base, you might as well go out and sign a big name. Alonso would certainly be that. He's a power hitter. He'd fit right in the middle of their order. You can make a case that maybe you don't want another righty with strikeout heavy, not as good defense. Maybe you look at a Christian Walker from Arizona. He's going to be a free agent as well. Plays great defense, Gold Glover perennially, and he hits home runs and for average too. So I think those are going to be the two biggest names this offseason at that position, maybe as a consolation prize for teams that don't get Soto.
All right, well, the Yankees did pick up the option on Luke Weaver. A big surprise, you could say, at closer. Didn't get his first career save until September 6th, but he was a valuable part of the Yankees bullpen. So do you think Weaver is the long-term answer at closer?
It certainly seems that way right now, at least going into the offseason. He's the lock to be in that role next year, unless the Yankees are able to go out and bring somebody else in. But he certainly earned that position with the way that September and October went. That was a gutsy postseason performance from him, and he really blossomed this season. I mean, they brought him back after 2023 as a some depth for their rotation, and he had never been in the bullpen before. So just a couple tweaks to his mechanics and maybe his mentality as well, and he turned out to be one of the better relievers in the game. It's kind of that Michael King role where Weaver led the American League in innings this year, and you don't necessarily see that nowadays in modern baseball where a reliever can go as many innings as him. So they could have him as that versatile King role from a couple years ago where he is able to go the 7th and 8th, and not necessarily just the 9th, the more traditional closer role. But I don't necessarily see Clay Holmes coming back. It's possible. I think he did a little better than a lot of fans thought. I know out there a lot of fans are not happy with Holmes. And he blew a lot of saves, it's true, but the metrics would say that he's a little better than some of the results. So I think the Yankees do need to upgrade in their bullpen, that's for sure, but Weaver's going to be an important piece for them.
Max, the biggest storyline of the offseason, not even just for the Yankees, probably in all of Major League Baseball. So how much pressure is there on Yankees ownership to keep Soto around? And not only that, but make sure that he doesn't go to the other team across town.
Right. It's a lot of pressure. The optics of letting Soto walk after just how spectacular this season was for him, it wouldn't be great. I'd compare it to Judge going into free agency a couple of years ago and how badly the Yankee fan base wanted him to come back and be a centerpiece for the future. And the Yankees executed that one, and it's the same kind of discussion. And Soto is a generational talent. You've seen some of the highlights from his season, and every at-bat is a appointment viewing. It's like the premiere of a movie. You want to be in your seat to make sure you watch it. And he means so much to this team, right? And the numbers that he was putting up, but also what he was like behind the scenes. And so he had every opportunity there after that last game of the World Series to say, yes, I have really enjoyed my time in New York. I'd like to come back to be with the Yankees. And he didn't. I think that's kind of just Scott Boras speak, that now he's going into free agency. He's going to explore all his different avenues, and he's going to make generational money, right? Generational wealth. And I think he's in the driver's seat here. Of course, he's not going to tip his hand one way or another. I do think he really did enjoy his time with the Yankees, but does he want to come back? It may just come down to the dollar signs at the end of the day.
Well, do you think that the Yankees can get creative with Soto, kind of the way the Dodgers maybe did with structuring Shohei Ohtani's contract, or was that more of a unique situation?
It was unique, but I do wonder how that could change how teams go about those high-profile free agencies moving forward. I mean, it's not like there have never been deferrals before, but the Yankees have other work to do beyond Soto, right? So if there's an opportunity to sign other players and invest your offseason budget in them, in first base, in third base, in the rotation, in the bullpen, et cetera, you can do that. And maybe Soto's willing to take a little bit less right now, knowing that he's still going to make that money later on. But I don't necessarily know if he's willing to do that, right? And maybe you'd have to have it be someone like a Cole or another veteran to take just a little bit less to help the team. Again, Soto's in the driver's seat here. Why would he want to take anything less than $500, $600, $700 million? I think he's going to get what he wants.
I wouldn't, right?
Right.
The struggles Aaron Judge had in the postseason, these two clearly had a lot of chemistry in the dugout at times, and their at-bats as well. But do you think that will have any impact on Soto's ultimate decision?
It can't hurt, right? I mean, Soto had the best year of his career batting in front of Judge. And as much as Judge left a bitter taste in everybody's mouths with the way he performed in the postseason, let's not forget that he had one of the better all-time seasons from a right-handed hitter during the regular season. And having that protection behind Soto is something that he hasn't necessarily had. So if he goes to the Mets, if he goes to the Dodgers, or insert high-spending contender here, he's got to think about who's going to be hitting behind me. How am I going to get pitched differently than I did with the Yankees? And so I think that the superstar tandem that they have is very unique. We're talking Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth, right? The numbers say that that's how good they've been in this season. So will they be like that for 7-8 more years? That's up to the Steinbrenner family.
What's the fan perspective here? I mean, we touched on it a little bit at the beginning here, but what are fans going to think if Soto does end up walking?
I made the joke earlier that the fans would be with pitchforks outside Yankee Stadium. That again, the optics of not bringing him back after how much the fan base fell in love with him. I mean, you go to any game this year and you sit in right field, or you're sitting anywhere in the stadium, and you hear those chants coming down for Soto, the Dominican flags, the way that they're 22 jerseys, just as many as 99 in the crowd and 45 for Cole. So the fan base really fell in love with him. Of course they did. What's not to love? But if he doesn't come back, then, it's tough for them.
You're going to see a lot of those jerseys in consignment shops in New York City, I guess, if he doesn't come back. Aaron Boone, kind of in some dubious company there. Do you think the Yankees have a blind spot when it comes to him, or is he the right manager for this team?
Look, I'll go back to the day that the Yankees lost Game 5, World Series comes to an end, and you ask anybody in that clubhouse, and that question did come up, what do you feel about Aaron Boone? Do you like him as a manager? And everybody praises him. And he is a player's manager. As much as there have been quite a few, I'll say, decisions that have been controversial and under a microscope from the fan base, because that's the expectation here. It's to win. And so any sort of nitpicky thing that a manager does or the coaching staff does will be under a microscope. So I think that at the end of the day, what the front office, what the other coaches, and what the players think about the manager is what matters most. And there hasn't been a need for a scapegoat over the past couple of years. If there was ever a time to fire Boone, it would have been after 2023 when they didn't make the playoffs. So not saying this was a successful season for them, right? Because the expectation is to win a title, but it was a great year and they got pretty close. So if the players like Boone, then I think he's going to stay.
Okay, let's get into a few of those nitpicky situations you talked about. Let's start with Game 1. Garrett Cole getting pulled after 88 pitches. Your thoughts on that?
I think he was gassed after a really long season. He's going to say he wants to go back out there, and he did. I do think they discussed this behind the scenes to see how much they could push him, but the repercussions of having him go out and overexert himself just a little too much would be dire going into next year, too. And this is a pitcher that hasn't dealt with elbow injuries before. He's only, 4 or 5 months removed from a pretty significant injury that kept him out for a couple of months. So I do think they were being cautious and conscientious. I wonder what would have happened if they got to a Game 7. And then there's a situation where, like with what the Dodgers did with Walker Buehler, who had a big injury the previous year. Do you bring someone back to win it all when everything is at stake? So I think it was probably smart to not have him go in a Game 4 on short rest, but we can certainly look back on it and criticize because it wasn't necessarily the right move.
Well, and another one here that, hey, one pitch goes the different way. You can talk about it differently. Nestor Cortez pitching to Freddie Freeman with the bases loaded, also in Game 1 of the World Series, ended up in the Grand Slam.
Right. You can say the Yankees should have brought Tim Hill in. He was a lefty specialist, and he got those guys out with that deceptive motion throughout the whole season. He had a really great summer, a breakout year, I would say. I think coming into this series, the expectation was that Nestor Cortez would be one of your guys to get Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman out. I think that they probably told him going into that game, if there's a lane for you to face those hitters, this is where we're going to bring you in. And they really believed that he was healthy, and he pushed to come back for the World Series. I think the biggest regret there, and this is something that Boone talked about, was not letting Luke Weaver pitch that inning and continue going out there and getting more outs, because that's something that he did throughout the season. It was get more than 3 outs. Just because he was the closer didn't mean he was relegated to 1 inning. So he doesn't necessarily regret going with a Cortez there or not going with a Tim Hill. I think it was not bringing Weaver back out to get the bottom of the Dodgers' order. And that's when things started to unravel, and it created that situation where Cortez had to pitch to Freeman.
And hard to know what would have happened had Weaver been in the game too, right? Okay, let's fast forward to Game 5, 5th inning of the World Series. Will live in infamy. Was that an indication of just kind of how much the Yankees struggled with some of the fundamentals all season?
It was a microcosm to a certain extent. I mean, in fairness, Aaron Judge makes that play 100 million times out of 100 million, right? You never see that from him. First error he's ever made in center field. Anthony Volpe's a Gold Glove shortstop. That's a really tough play to his right. And Jazz Chisholm hasn't played a lot of third base, so he's backpedaling to get back to the bag, and that's when the throw comes over. And Volpe owned up to that. He spiked the throw. He yanked it a little bit to the left. And then the miscommunication between Cole and Rizzo at first, that's a play that you're practicing the first day of spring training. And with what's at stake, you can't make that mistake there. But Cole thought that it was going right to Rizzo and that he'd cover. Rizzo, it spun on him a little bit, and after what happened in the inning, he was just going to make sure that he gloved it, because if it went through his legs or something like that, that would have been even worse.
Yeah.
So he just made sure he looked up, and Cole wasn't covering. So mistakes, like I said earlier, they've been a trend for this team. Something has to change to make sure that the fundamentals are improved. But when you make those mistakes against a team like the Dodgers on that stage, of course Los Angeles was going to take advantage. And when you have that strong of a middle of the order with Freeman and Teoscar Hernandez coming up next, it was only a matter of time until they broke that game open.
Okay, another Game 5 decision, not coming out to the mound during that 5th inning. Garrett Cole faced 10 batters, 38 pitches. As you kind of mentioned in Game 1, he was clearly gassed in this situation.
That's an interesting idea. I think that I don't recall if Rizzo maybe went over there, if they had just the players talk to him. I can't remember that off the top of my head, but you're rolling with your ace, right? And that's a pitcher that you've trusted to get the job done for years and years, and he has. And to a certain extent, he did bear down, struck out 2 guys in a row, and then gets the ground ball with Betts to end the inning. right? I mean, he did everything he needed to do. If he covers, it's still 5-0. They win that game, and then it goes back to LA. So in retrospect, sure, they probably should have given him a little bit of a break, tried to settle him in. But if he makes better pitches, maybe he gets Freeman and Hernandez out, and then the game's totally different.
And like you said, he did get the out. He just didn't get the out. All right. Thank you so much, Max. This has been a really enlightening conversation. Really appreciate you coming in studio
Thanks
tonight.
for having me, Kate.
Make sure you check him out at NJ Advanced Media. You can find him on X at Max T. Goodman.